The Business Simplicity Podcast, where leaders share their most successful strategies and the failures that inspired them, so business owners and managers can avoid the suffering and reap the benefits. With your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to the Business Simplicity Podcast. This is Chris Parker, and I'm having a conversation with Jonas Tornquist, who's from Epex Spot. And I've known Jonas for a couple of years now. We were introduced informally and then ended up doing a bit of sort of IT digital strategy work and a little ongoing coaching for some of his organization over time. And now we're catching up on leadership. I'm really curious about that. A lot of questions about this for Jonas as the COO of a large organization that not many people maybe have heard of. So I'm curious if he can share a little bit about that. But Jonas, thank you for joining. Can you kick us off with just sharing what is it that you do?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for having me. It's great to chat to you and great to be part of the podcast. Well, what do I do and who am I? I feel a little bit like an international citizen. I've lived and worked in 6 countries. I spent the last 27 years doing so. I think this has given me a little bit of an international perspective, cultural differences, all of those sort of things. I live with my Australian wife. I have a French dog, and my children, when they were younger, used to say that they were British because they were born there. So they have this sort of geographic view of where they're from. And also professionally, I would say I have a broad background. I did physics and I did business studies, and I've worked mostly in and around the energy sector, but from very many different angles, I would say. So both in large blue chip companies and in smaller companies. I've been involved in trading businesses, in governments, in more R&D companies with traders, and now I'm with the exchange, Epex Spot, where I'm COO and really running the day-to-day activities of the exchange. And the exchange is trading. Yeah, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, you're based in the Netherlands, and Epex has an office in Amsterdam and in Paris. So maybe a few words on Epex, just for people who can put that in context.
Yeah. So Epex is an energy exchange. We trade, or we don't trade, but our customers trade electricity, and it's really very short-term electricity. And that helps them balance supply and demand from, let's say, wind farms or solar or other generating stations with the demand of customers, industrials, and so forth. And it's really helping, I would say, the energy transition and helping really on a second by second basis, balancing all the supply and demand so that we all have, continuous, high, reliable supply of electricity at the best possible price.
Yeah, it's quite a large organization that normally people wouldn't hear about, because the energy companies or the grids, I think, are actually your customers. So it's
exactly,
so it's really behind the scenes. So
yeah, exactly, and present all over Europe, and many people don't know what happens when they press the button, but there's a lot of things going on in the background, and people can buy and sell 15-minute chunks of electricity right up until 5 minutes before it's actually consumed. So, yeah, no, it's a really quite an interesting part of the energy business at this point in time, actually.
I've certainly been fascinated as I've been able to get to know the business a bit while talking about the digital and the IT transformation. And the volume of data there as well, and the algorithms and the tooling that you provide, but that's all for another day. So what I just adore about interacting with you, Jonas, is, and also I was doing a little research and looked you up on LinkedIn, as I do, and even your LinkedIn sort of about is so well articulated and so clear. I think I'm going to copy that format. So if people want to, from my opinion, see a really nice about section of on LinkedIn is check out Jonas on LinkedIn. And he just starts with, I am a leader, innovator, and agent for change. And I feel that is so true. What I appreciate about learning from you as we've been interacting is it's a business. There's a solid business drive, but there's also a very human dimension. So I'm really curious. You're the COO for an energy exchange, but why? Like for your own motivation, or like what brings you to do that for now over 10 years?
For me, I think the why comes from kind of a young age. Actually, I went on my first trip alone at the age of 17, and then, I mean, as I said in the intro, I've spent the last 27 years really on the road, and I think what really drives me is really I'm super curious about everything and everyone, and I really love making progress. Improving myself, improving teams, improving organizations, and also love seeing people grow. And love encouraging and helping people to do their best. So that really, I think, is for me the fundamental interest, I would say, that drives me. So it's that curiosity and wanting to make the world a better place. That's the sort of the driver at heart, I would say. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Let me grab onto curiosity, because in another part of my life with some leadership and organizational development coaches, this premise of lazy leadership versus love leadership is coming up, and maybe they're the wrong words, but some people can take a very passive approach to leadership and see people as cogs in a system. But what I find is those that are genuinely curious about the humans, I think can become much more impactful, by my values. How does that sort of manifest itself? Like being curious in an organization. What does that actually mean? Like how do you satisfy your curiosity in a leadership role?
Because you learn all the time, and you're challenged all the time. From everywhere, everything. I mean, people above you, peers, people who work for you. It's always challenges that come your way. And when you do have a growth mindset, and I consider myself having a growth mindset, and the curiosity is one part of that, that's really motivating, And you just see happy faces at the end of the day. You just see them doing things I didn't think was possible, for example, within the teams, or you yourself, you learn a new skill. I mean, I think that's what the funness is all about. And also shared success is much greater than individual success, because for anyone who's been doing anything where a team has won, it's such a great feeling to have a team experience rather than an individual success, in my view. So that's probably, that answers your question.
It did, and it also sets up, for the question that we've been, kicking around a little bit. Going back, I think maybe a couple of months when we first started talking about this. And again, this morning is, as far as a strategy or tactic that you can recommend, we're really orienting around leadership, identifying leadership, selection leadership, onboarding, but then also realizing that it's not just the leader, it's actually the team element. So I'm just going to open that up, and when you're talking about organizing or creating the space in an organization for success, which has a lot to do with leadership, I will have to admit that I've been learning so much as we've been working together, for looking at a holistic view of the organization, and then you had a challenge to identify a new IT director along the way, and there was a whole process we went through that I was happy to be a part of. But I was really fascinated on how both caring and sort of disciplined you were going through all those stages. So I'd love it if I just open it up and say, okay, well, what was in your mind, or what is in your mind as you're looking at where a team is now and how to get it to the next place?
Well, first thing about teams is teamwork, of course. They have to work as a team. You have to work as a team. Everyone is part of a team. I'm part of a team as the leader of one. I'm part of several other teams as well, and the leaders within the team are leaders of other teams, and in fact, even people who are a team member without having any formal responsibility for staff itself. I mean, they're also leaders, because you have to also have great leadership in terms of technical excellence, or in terms of some sort of speciality, or whatever the topic is. So really, I believe everyone has to possess that leadership and teamwork. But coming back to the team, I think that for me, the greatest learning over the years is, I mean, to have a great team, you have to have a complementary team. So, you can't have a team which are replicas of yourself, if I put it that way. There has to be complementary skills. And having spent time to think about myself and my strengths and my weaknesses and how I operate compared to those of others, you start realizing more and more that all of those things are a little bit like the yin and yang, and you have to therefore complement your own shortcomings by having a team that together is well balanced and fits together. So I would say that's really one of the key ones. And for me, it's about diversity, and it's diversity in all respects. I mean, it's in backgrounds, from the countries that people come from the cultures they've grown up in, men and women, of course, and all of those sort of aspects. And I truly believe that a diverse team is really a much better skilled team to make great progress, and to be high performing.
Jumping in, and if we kick around, if we use the words lazy versus love, I guess it could be tempting to be lazy and just sort of hire replicas of yourself, because if you're hiring people that are different, by definition, they have different personalities, characters, values, skill sets, knowledge, and therefore conflict, because people will have a different opinion. And
absolutely,
absolutely. So how do you play with that over time? It's I definitely believe it's the right way to go, but it's maybe not the easiest path, at least in the beginning.
You're totally right. It's not the easy path, but the easy path is not also the path which will get you to achieve great things, right? If you have a lazy approach, if we just take sports, for example, and sit on your sofa, you're not going to be able to, run a marathon in a great time, right? You have to have the discipline and the wish to improve and to do a good job, and I think that's fundamentally, I'm very much like that personally. I love achieving things, I love doing things, and I love learning new things. I love challenging myself to get better, continuously improve. But actually, I fundamentally believe that everybody, actually, I think it's human nature, that if at the end of the week you've not been lazy, but you've worked hard and you've achieved something nice, you are happier as a person, actually. And I think happiness is a real key one, because we spend so much time at work, more time at work than we are with our families in many respects. So if people go to work and they're unhappy, to me, then it's not worth it. It's not worth it. So it's got to be part of it, and therefore you have to learn to love those challenges and love those conflicts and overcome those conflicts, which, by the way, is not easy. It never is. But it's something that I think is perfectly possible. And so long as you approach it in the right sort of way, conflicts does not need to be shouting matches. They are opportunities to learn and to grow, and that's how I like to manage those things. But, I think, what do you think?
Well, I there's so much going on in my head. There's a team dynamic cycle of that forming, storming, norming, performing, which I love. And so for people, the forming is a group of people coming together. It also could be your family on a holiday. Okay, we're coming together to do something. And then the storming is, well, wait, I want to go to the, get the ice cream. And no, I want to go get the churros or whatever it is. And then you can either not speak about it and let it simmer, but then you've never actually normed. So you've never came to the okay, we're going to do ice cream today and churros tomorrow, or whatever. We're going to play rock, paper, scissors, or some other way of making a decision. And then you can, okay, well, then we can go do our thing and actually, have peace of mind and calm. And then, oh, by the way, then you're going to meet some people on your holiday and you're going to reform. And so there's a new dynamic. And this is just this continue forever, this ever process. And it's, and yeah, I think you have to go through that. In my world, last week or the week before, we just acquired an organization from a different culture. And I purposely threw some hand grenades the week before, realizing that we needed to have some serious, adult grown-up conversations. And if we didn't, if we danced around it and didn't love that and didn't lean into it, then I really felt that it would continue to stink and maybe turn toxic. So this was that forming, storming. Storming doesn't have to be negative conflict. It can actually be caring, adult, eye-to-eye conflict. No,
I totally agree. And on that conflict side, it's also you've got to train yourself and others to have that positive interaction, and to have that positive conflict, if you think of it that way, where you're actually constructive about it, because feedback is and it really depends also on the cultures. I mean, for some people it's super difficult to give feedback and receive feedback, and in some cultures it's dealt with in completely different ways than others. I mean, you worked a bit with Swedish people, right? I mean, I have roots in Sweden. One part of Swedish society that I struggle with, having now been in some other cultures where they're much more direct, like the Dutch, for example, or also Australian, and for you also American, where you put the issues on the table, is that somehow a little bit that tendency is to bury their head in the sand sometimes. But I don't know, it'd be interesting to hear your views on that, because I think you've also worked a little bit with Swedish organizations and so forth, and maybe it's something you've also noticed.
Well, it's fascinating. In our organization, we've got Swedish and Belgium and Dutch and French, and now Egyptian. And the way, I think the most external way that you can see these cultural differences is in these conflict situations, meaning are they direct or indirect? Like I was having lunch with someone reflecting on a perspective on Egyptian culture, and a really nice insight there was, according to this person, that there are no straight lines in Egyptian business culture. Meaning, my approach of what's the answer, might actually be generating more loopy questions because they're not perhaps open to that. And so for me, it's really, learning that. And I think in Swedish culture, there's a I don't know, it's an overconfidence that I feel that doesn't create a lot of opening for dialogue and introspection. So even though there's something that maybe is confusing or conflicting on the table, that the opportunity to really rip it open in a safe way is I don't know. Yeah, I think you have to build that relationship for a while before you can really crack those nuts. And some of the people I've been working with Sweden are marvelous that way. Very open, very, very vulnerable. But you got to find it in the right time and say, hey, let's crack this nut now. Whereas in Belgium culture, it's a bit harder to grab that because it's much more informal than maybe Swedish. But then there's also this strong hierarchical drive behind it. And so actually finding the nut can be hard in the Belgian culture. And we're playing around with all of these. And then, but of course, building teams has this diversity, this joyful color of individual personalities. So, how do you weave that? Because I really felt when we were working over the last, I don't know, whatever year or two, that I don't think you had the end in mind, but you were definitely sort of crocheting, step by step, row by row. Okay, we're doing this thing. We're weaving, and you were going in a direction without actually knowing the answer. So maybe throw out some tips or strategies on that. On if someone is going from maybe a fragmented, a split energy team, maybe people coming to the shop not happy, as you mentioned before. I think that's super important. So those people are probably not good for them where they are, and maybe not good for other people. And then shifting that towards a more productive and positive direction. What's your secret sauce?
What's my secret sauce? I think, well, it always, of course, depends on the situation, but I would say, so we start with what you talked about with the team and building a great team. So you need to work out first, what do you really want? And this is kind of, in my mind, it's more of a process than something you just know, because you have to sort of have a lot of conversations. You have to listen to a lot of people. You have to, it's all experience as well. You have to tried a few things and failed with a few things and things like that, and so I think for me, the secret sauce is probably, if I really distill it down, after having taken care of the team itself and what you need within that team, when you look at then distilling it down to what do you need from a particular person within that team, I would say most of the time I go for mindset over skills. So what is their attitude really, and how will that attitude fit within the culture, and how will it drive and bring everyone else up, with it as well. And that sort of mindset is really comes down to some of these things we've just been talking about. Are they happy to learn? Are they happy to receive feedback? Are they happy to give feedback? Are they happy to be happy? Do they have that sort of a positive drive and willingness to get things done, and willingness to go places? And I think a lot of that attitude comes down to your inner confidence, as a person as well, because I've seen throughout the years that really having confidence in yourself is super important for being able to take and receive that feedback, and for being able to have that mature conflict as you described so well before. So for me, that the secret sauce is really about, I think, the attitude of the person first, and then about their skills and what they actually know, because you can teach those things very easily, but you can't teach as easily the attitude and the personality and that sort of positive thing, and and there's lots of things there we can dive into.
It's
I think
triggering for me, because from my say my service time back in the States with Nordstrom and Apple and things, like, where one of the principles or heuristics is hire the smile and train the rest, is what really was really triggering. And then what I'm fascinated is and I'm reflecting, does that scale? Meaning, does that, because that's typically frontline service people. And I think it absolutely scales into leadership as well, because if leadership doesn't have that engagement, call it positivity, I don't know, then how will the people influenced by that person have that engagement? So it's really a almost a network effect or a community effect.
Yeah, I've never heard that hire the smile, but it's a nice phrase. But I think it's, for me, too simple, because there's plenty of people with great smiles. But I think there's many things in the personality and in their way of thinking and way of doing things which you have to also look for. I think, do they have real grit? Because are you really prepared? Because as a manager, as a leader, just in general as a person, we face lots of difficult things. So are they really prepared to tackle the difficult stuff and not go for the lazy leadership, as you said before? I think also the why for them. Why do they want to lead? Why do they want to be the leader themselves? Because if it's about being a leader for more themselves rather than being the leader because they want to make sure that the team is great and see other people flourish, I think that's a very important distinction. And you can find then very different behaviors behind it. You have to love seeing other people do great things, and you have to to not almost not want to, you have to be so humble that you almost don't want to take any of the credit yourself, and I think that, to me, are other important bits rather than just the smile itself. There's probably many more, but
yeah, well, I guess there's a again, frontline service employees hire the smile and train the rest. Assumes trainability, but it is very simplistic, and this is someone flipping burgers or something.
Deliberately so, I'm sure.
Yeah, and
by the way, I mean, you're into the simplicity part of things, and one of the quotes that I love a lot is that things have to be, as simple as possible, but not simpler.
But not simpler.
And this is always a great thing to remember, because and I have a personal tendency to simplify too much, for example, and so you always have to remind yourself to pull yourself back from that. And the same goes also for finding leaders and teams. You have to spend a bit of time and think about it and dig into it a lot.
Well, I think if you're comparing leadership and simplicity, there's a lot of parallels. Meaning, if you're approaching it from a problem or complexity perspective, both leadership and simplicity, then you're going to come up with something perhaps odd. So I think it really has to do with the intent. And so when like when enterprise architecture or other type of design stuff, I really try to get people, after they've studied the problem, to get into a different headspace to actually propose the solution. Because if you start proposing solutions from the perspective of the problem, you'll probably just get more of what you're trying to get rid of. And I think that can also really apply to people. And also that it's never done, meaning there's no answer. So like, okay, well, what's the most simple thing here? And not more simple than it needs to be. Well, that will change tomorrow when the context changes. So and the same thing with leadership. It's okay, well, maybe this is where we need to strive for this week. But, whenever you open a new geography or do an acquisition, or someone else quits or starts, or, these things are always shifting. I think this is where that love dimension comes in. There's the love to have the discipline to continue to reflect and to continue to discover. Come back to your thing, be curious.
Yeah, no, you're right. And framing the problem, as you say, is also
Mm.
super important, and I really, really enjoy that when when the teams themselves, you have something in mind always, you have a sort of an idea where you think you will end up, but then when they come back with solutions that are even more smart and interesting that you could possibly have done yourself, and that's what you get from that great team dynamic and the willingness of the leaders to explore all the things, like, is it even the right question, as you say, is it even right? So no, it's really nice.
We're almost at 30 minutes in this, so it's but as always with you, I'm enjoying it completely. Let me open up a potential can of worms. Sometimes people don't work on a team, and sometimes the best thing is for someone to move on to other things. Maybe a different job in the team, or maybe a different job in the company, or do something else. How do you reflect on that? Because that can be, I think it can be kind of, say, more fun and positive to hire the new person or promote the new person, but sometimes it's the most loving thing for that individual, and the most loving thing for the rest of the people on the team for a change to be made. Maybe apply the curiosity dimension to that very difficult human topic.
Well, you always have to do what's best for the team, of course. So, and a team is, function of all its parts, and of course sometimes it doesn't work, which is normal. I truly believe that we all have our great skills and we all have our weaknesses. I'm a terrible painter, for example. So if I were to try to become a painter, I think I would have a miserable life and a miserable career, and I would ultimately not be happy. I'm convinced also that the same goes for most individuals. To truly be happy and reach your potential, you have to do what you really love to do and what you really, are good at, and what you enjoy, rather than trying to be someone else, and so I think whilst those topics are always difficult, I believe in the end, actually, it's good for everyone to make sure that they find the spot which is right for them, and therefore can be happy and have a fulfilling and interesting life,
Well, what I yeah, not surprisingly, I guess, but I agree. And what I find to make it easier in those situations is if I'm approaching it from a perspective of love and care, and not retribution or blame, or like, well, actually, I know early in my career, I'm not sure where I got it coached, so somehow, but when people are in the wrong place in an organization, it's kind of like walking, with your neck kinked all day long. So it's just exhausting and tiring and painful, and that just grinds people down. And sometimes, okay, that person has to own their own success and their own future, but sometimes you can nudge or work with them and put them in different, more positive places. So love it. So
no, and I'm a big fan, actually, of rotating people also within different roles and do different things, because you always learn and cross fertilize, and so you always have to do that sort of stuff, with the care for the individual, and to see also how things fit.
Yeah,
totally agree with that.
So Jonas Tornquist from Ebullient. I've been playing the last couple episodes with asking the challenging question at the end, and I think hiring the smile and training the rest could be, but I like yours, like which is in a team, focus on mindset over skill set. Is that a good summary of the challenge? And
yeah, I would say so. Yeah. I would say so. Yeah, no, it's a good one.
Yeah. So the invitation for everyone is when we publish this on LinkedIn, really curious if people agree or disagree with that. Meaning, is it skill set first, or is it mindset first, or is it something else first? Like when you're looking at leadership and composition of a team, what do you go for? So the question is, agree or disagree? Mindset over skill set. Hire the smile, train the rest. So we'll see. So you can find Jonas again. Check out, I think, his best ever about section on LinkedIn. I think it's just very clear and totally explains who he is. Jonas Tornquist, thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure, as always, engaging with you.
Chris, the same goes for me. Pleasure always to have a chat with you. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you for listening. Download the Simplicity Toolkit from Ebullient.com to discover the power of the Simplicity Scan and Sprint. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player.